Everything you know about Napoleon's death is a lie. The greatest military genius in history didn't die peacefully in his sleep. He was murdered, slowly, deliberately, and the evidence was hidden for over 140 years until scientists finally uncovered the truth buried in his hair. But the real horror isn't just how he died. It's who did it, and why the world conspired to forget. May 5, 1821. A remote volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The man who once commanded armies of 500,000 soldiers, who crowned himself emperor and brought Europe to its knees, lies dying in a damp, rat-infested room. He weighs barely 150 pounds. His skin has turned yellow. His hair is falling out in clumps. And he's screaming. This is the story of the most shocking murder in history. The assassination that changed the fate of empires. And the conspiracy that kept it secret for over a century. 6 years earlier, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the height of his power. Emperor of France, master of continental Europe. He had defeated every coalition sent against him, crushed the armies of Austria, Prussia, and Russia. His civil code revolutionized law across dozens of nations. He was 45 years old and seemingly invincible. Then came Waterloo, June 18, 1815. In a single afternoon, everything collapsed. The British and Prussians crushed his forces. His empire evaporated like morning fog, and Napoleon faced a choice: flee to America and start over, or surrender to the British and hope for mercy. He chose mercy. Fatal mistake. The British didn't execute him. That would have made him a martyr. Instead, they did something far more cruel. They sent him to the most remote prison on Earth, St. Helena, a tiny volcanic rock 1,200 miles from the nearest continent, surrounded by shark-infested waters and patrolled by British warships. A place where escape was impossible and hope went to die. Napoleon arrived in October 1815, still defiant, still believing the British would treat him with the respect due to a former head of state. He was assigned to Longwood House, a crumbling mansion that leaked when it rained and bred mold in every corner. The British governor, Sir Hudson Lowe, made it clear this would be no comfortable exile. Lowe was a petty bureaucrat with a soldier's uniform and a tyrant's heart. He restricted Napoleon's movements, opened his mail, spied on his conversations, reduced his household budget until the former emperor couldn't afford firewood. Every day was a calculated humiliation designed to break the man who had broken Europe. But Napoleon had survived worse. He had crossed the Alps in winter, marched to Moscow and back, escaped from Elba, and reclaimed his throne in 100 days without firing a shot. Surely he could survive a few years of British pettiness? That's what everyone thought. Then his body started betraying him. It began with stomach pains, sharp, stabbing sensations that left him doubled over for hours. At first, Napoleon blamed the food. The British were feeding him inferior rations, he claimed, probably intentional. Then came the headaches, blinding migraines that made him scream and tear at his hair. His doctor, an Irishman named Barry O'Mara, prescribed laudanum for the pain. It helped temporarily, but the symptoms kept getting worse. By 1817, Napoleon's skin had taken on a strange pallor, not the healthy tan of a soldier who had campaigned across 3 continents, but a sickly yellow-gray. His legs swelled with fluid. He lost his appetite entirely, surviving on wine and occasional bites of bread. The man who once reviewed troops for 12 hours straight could barely walk from his bedroom to his study. O'Mara grew suspicious. These weren't the symptoms of a man dying from natural causes. He suspected the damp climate, the moldy house, the psychological torture of confinement. But when he examined Napoleon more closely, he found something that terrified him. The symptoms matched arsenic poisoning. Arsenic, the poison of kings and assassins. If this revelation shocked you, smash that like button, because what happens next gets even darker. O'Mara confronted Governor Lowe, demanded better accommodations for his patient, insisted on proper medical care. Lowe's response: he had O'Mara removed from the island and replaced with a more compliant doctor, a man who would ask no questions and file the reports the British wanted. Napoleon was now completely at their mercy. The new doctor, Francesco Annamarchi, was a Corsican anatomist with limited clinical experience. He arrived in 1819 to find Napoleon in catastrophic decline. The emperor's weight had plummeted. His once sharp mind drifted in and out of confusion. He spent most days in bed, too weak to stand. occasionally rousing himself to dictate his memoirs to the few loyal followers still permitted to see him. Those memoirs are haunting. Between the military campaigns and political philosophies, Napoleon kept returning to one question. Why was this happening to him? He had been healthy his entire life, survived dozens of battles, never sick, never weak. And now, in his early 50s, his body was disintegrating. "They want me to die slowly," he told his valet. Fast would be too obvious. By 1821, Napoleon knew he was dying. He could feel it in his bones. The pain had become constant, a fire that consumed him from the inside. His abdomen was swollen like a grotesque pregnancy. He vomited black bile. His hair came out in handfuls. And still, the British doctors insisted nothing was wrong. Just liver disease, they said. Natural causes. Happens to middle-aged men. But make sure you're subscribed because the evidence that proves otherwise will blow your mind. In his final weeks, Napoleon made a strange request. He asked that samples of his hair be cut and preserved, given to his most trusted companions, locked away for posterity. At the time, everyone assumed it was vanity. The great Napoleon wanting to preserve himself for history. It wasn't vanity. It was evidence. May 5, 1821, 5:49 p.m. Napoleon Bonaparte died after 6 years of captivity. He was 51 years old. The official cause of death, stomach cancer. The British doctors performed an autopsy, found ulcers in his stomach, and declared the case closed. Just another middle-aged man succumbing to disease. Nothing suspicious. Nothing to investigate. They buried him on St. Helena, in a valley he had once said was the only beautiful spot on that cursed island. The British refused to let his body return to France. Even in death, he would remain their prisoner. Europe moved on. The monarchy was restored. The concert of Europe established a new balance of power. Napoleon became a historical footnote, a cautionary tale about ambition and hubris. His death was unremarkable, natural, expected. For 140 years, that's where the story ended. Then in 1961, a Swedish dentist named Sten Forshuffud changed everything. Forshuffud wasn't a historian or a detective. He was just a Napoleon enthusiast who had read every available account of the emperor's final years. And something bothered him. The symptoms didn't match stomach cancer. They matched something else, something deliberate. He obtained samples of Napoleon's hair, the ones the emperor had ordered preserved, and he subjected them to nuclear activation analysis, a cutting-edge forensic technique that could detect trace elements at the molecular level. The results were staggering. Napoleon's hair contained arsenic levels 13 times higher than normal, not just in one sample, in all of them. And the concentrations spiked dramatically during his final years on St. Helena. This wasn't environmental exposure. This wasn't natural accumulation. This was systematic poisoning. Someone had been slowly killing Napoleon Bonaparte. The revelation detonated like a bomb in academic circles. Suddenly, every detail of Napoleon's final years took on sinister significance. The restricted diet, the compliant doctors, the isolation from anyone who might ask questions. Governor Lowe's obsessive control over every aspect of Napoleon's life. But who actually administered the poison? Investigators focused on Charles Tristan, Comte de Montholon, one of Napoleon's most trusted companions on St. Helena, a man who had followed the emperor into exile, who slept in the room next to him, who prepared his food and drink. A man who, records show, received substantial payments from the French royal government during Napoleon's captivity. Payments for what? Montholon had motive. With Napoleon dead, the Bourbon monarchy could solidify its power without fear of another return from exile. He had opportunity, unrestricted access to Napoleon's food and wine. And he had means. Arsenic was colorless, nearly tasteless, and could be administered in tiny doses over months. What do you think? Was Montholon the assassin, or was he just another pawn in a larger conspiracy? Let us know in the comments. But here's where it gets even more twisted. Some historians argue Montholon was just the tool, that the orders came from higher up, from the British government, terrified that Napoleon might somehow escape again, or from the restored French monarchy, desperate to eliminate any rallying point for revolutionary sentiment, or from Austrian Prince Metternich, the architect of Europe's new order, who couldn't risk Napoleon's supporters attempting a rescue. The evidence suggests all three may have been involved. A conspiracy of empires united by one goal: ensure Napoleon Bonaparte never threatened the established order again. They succeeded, but they couldn't destroy the evidence in his hair. Napoleon's death changed Europe forever. It closed the book on 25 years of revolutionary warfare. It secured the conservative monarchies for another generation. It guaranteed France would remain relatively weak and divided. All because one man in a damp mansion on a remote island was slowly fed poison until his body gave out. The irony is almost poetic. Napoleon, who had poisoned thousands with the grape shot of his cannons, died from poison himself. The man who believed he was destiny incarnate discovered that destiny could be bought with arsenic and a compliant doctor. Join our community of history seekers by subscribing, because there are more hidden truths like this waiting to be uncovered. But perhaps the most horrific part isn't the murder itself. It's the cover-up. For 140 years, the official story stood unchallenged. History textbooks taught generations of students that Napoleon died of natural causes, that his captivity, while harsh, was lawful and justified, that the British acted with honor and the French monarchy with legitimacy. All lies. The truth was locked in strands of hair, waiting for someone to look closely enough, waiting for technology advanced enough to detect molecules of murder, waiting for history to catch up with reality. Today, St. Helena is a tourist destination. You can visit Longwood House, see the room where Napoleon died, walk through the gardens where he spent his final days. The British have even returned some of his personal effects, made him into a quaint historical attraction. A tragic figure, yes, but nothing too disturbing. Nothing that challenges the comfortable narrative of European history. But if you stand in that death room, in that damp mansion where mold still grows in the corners, you can almost hear the screams. You can feel the presence of a man who conquered nations reduced to a poisoned prisoner. You can sense the magnitude of the crime that was committed there. Napoleon Bonaparte didn't just die on St. Helena. He was executed, slowly, methodically, by the very people who claimed to represent civilization and justice. And they got away with it for over a century. The question isn't whether he was murdered. The forensic evidence is overwhelming. The question is, how many other historical deaths that we accept as natural were actually assassinations? How many other graves contained evidence of crimes hidden by official narratives and compliant historians? What other lies are we still believing? Here's what keeps historians awake at night. If they could successfully murder and cover up the death of the most famous man in Europe, who else did they kill? What other inconvenient figures died of sudden illnesses or unfortunate accidents? How many other strands of hair contain evidence of crimes that no one has thought to investigate? Napoleon's story is a reminder that history is written by survivors, not truth-tellers. That official causes of death can be official lies. That the powerful will do anything to maintain power, including murder, including conspiracy, including rewriting reality itself. So the next time you read about a historical figure dying of natural causes, ask yourself, what would their hair reveal under analysis? What evidence was buried with them? What truth died in that grave? Because Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who reshaped Europe and terrified kings, died screaming in a moldy room while his murderers watched and took notes. They recorded his symptoms. They documented his decline. They preserved every detail of his suffering, everything except the truth. If this investigation into one of history's darkest conspiracies opened your eyes to how deep these cover-ups go, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Do you think Napoleon was murdered by one conspirator, or was this a plot involving multiple governments? And more importantly, what other historical deaths should we be investigating? The poison that killed Napoleon is still out there, not in bottles labeled arsenic, but in the lies we're told about power and justice and the natural order of things. In the comfortable narratives that let us sleep at night. In the official histories that never quite explain the convenient deaths of inconvenient people. Napoleon knew he was being murdered. He said so. He documented it. He preserved the evidence in his hair. And for 140 years, no one believed him. What else aren't we believing?